So we wanted to get in and start with what is continuous delivery, because there are a lot of different opinions on what it is, how it is. And so this is off of the website. Now you can read this if you want. It's kind of a long description. So what I like to do is I like to boil things down quite a bit, because I'm all about fast delivery, right? And so for us, what it really means is that every time we write a line of code, every time we commit it, it goes straight to production after it passes through a pipeline. Is that what that says? I think it's what it says. Hopefully it's what it says. So that's quite different than a lot of organizations work. And so we're going to spend some time elaborating on that quite a bit. In fact, for some people that sounds very frightening. The first time that they hear that, they think, wow, why would you ever do such a crazy thing? Commit code and go straight to production, and we can't trust our developers to write the code or to produce something that's high quality enough. And so instead of explaining why initially, I want to start with a story. And this happened just before I arrived, but when I was there, they continuously talked about this. They would hold this up as part of their problem. So, very large website, US company, and thousands and thousands of users, heavy volume. And the product owner decided, you know, we really need to improve the way that users navigate to our site. And so, what did she do? Well, she started off by spending some time with some designers, and they came up with the new idea. And of course, the next step was going to one of the development teams and having them kind of break it down and estimate it, because we had to get budget approval, right? And so they come up with a rough estimate. They take that number and they eventually get into the budget process, get the budget approval. Wow, now we've got the money, but the team that was going to do it was actually on something else, so they had to wait a little while until that team was available. But eventually they were available, and they took it, they built the thing, and they were ready to release. Now this specific company, they're very customer focused, so they have this thing that they call the first time user experience, and it's very important to them. So in this specific case, what it was after they rolled out live, the first time that you would go to the site, a nice little overlay would pop up, and it would explain, hey, here's some different things, and it had some nice images that you could go through, and it even had a little video that you could watch, so that you can kind of become comfortable with the new layout. And then there was this checkbox at the bottom, which was to opt in to the new navigation. And so they released this software and watched it go. Day one, 2%, 5%, 7%. The team was very excited. Users were starting to sign in and starting to use it. I think it got up to about 9% before it leveled off. Now, this release was actually close to 2 years after the product owner came up with the original idea. Now, how many of you, does that feel like where you work? How many of you want to raise your hand, but you're afraid to because your boss is here? You don't want him to see you raising your hand? Okay. So, unfortunately in our industry, that's kind of common, where the business or the product folks come up with an idea, and because of all the overhead that we have and the processes, that it takes a very, very, very long time to get that out. And in this case, to get it out, to only learn that the majority of the users really weren't interested in it, and they didn't want it at all. So, so this is a product owner, this little purple guy here.
That's how they look.
That's exactly. Do we have any product people here? Any? Yeah. Okay. That's you.
The purple ones.
That's you. Mm-hmm. And so product folks typically are working with a team to kind of build the software that they have. And we like to think of this idea that above the product owner is the whole world. Okay? And the product owner's job is to kind of monitor or watch the whole world, to constantly make decisions. And let me get a little bit more specific. I'll start to narrow down the world just a little bit. Who's in the world? Well, clearly our customers are there. We need to know how our customers feel about the product that we have out. Are they happy with it? Are there features that they think are missing? Whatever, right? our competitors are in the world. We need to know what they're doing. If a competitor comes out with something new and they start to take market share from us, we very likely want to react, right? In any company, there are a lot of other stakeholders that are interested in what we're doing. Everybody has an opinion, right?
Companies that do something completely different and come up with something that can totally interrupt and disrupt what you're doing. They are also in the world.
Yes. Since we're talking about software, we've got Google and Apple up there, right? Google can come out with something new that we decide that we can leverage to our advantage, and we may want to do that. But the whole idea here is that anything that's up in the world could change, and it could really change our focus. It could change what our priority is. And so having these projects that take 2 years, or having, and the project itself only really took about 4 months to build. So they said, yes, see, we're delivering in 4 months, but in actual, they delivered in 2 years. And so having such a long roadmap just doesn't make any sense, because something could change next week, and we need to be able to adapt.
And how do these product owners take now everything that comes from the world and bring it to the team? It is not an easy thing, right? Because there are so many, sometimes even conflicting ideas that come to product owners, and how can they figure now out all this data that they have, all this information that they have, and come up with a feature with a user story to do.
So again, back to continuous delivery then. So why would we do such a thing? Well, I find that the groups that I work with that are doing this, there are a lot of interesting characteristics that are repeated again and again and again. So obviously it's without saying that there's a much faster time to market. In fact, a lot of the ideas that I work with, one of the groups that I'm working with right now, product owner comes up with an idea, and in less than a week, typically, we can get that idea out into the customer's hands. Lower risk releases. Now, this is going to be a little controversial, because if you're deploying raw code all the time, how do we drive risk down? We'll talk about that in just a little while. Higher quality. Again, if we're going to be delivering so frequently, keeping the quality very high is paramount. There's no way we can let the quality slide and continuously deliver. So I'll talk about how do we keep the quality high. Lower costs, absolutely lower costs, because first of all, we are using different ways to validate the features that we're adding. We would probably never end up in a situation where we deliver something really large that our users don't want because of the methodologies that we use to help determine what they want. Better products, happier customers, and last but not least, happier teams. Developers actually get to write and deliver code, which is what they want to do, and not sit in meetings all day.
So do you like what you see there? Do you like those whys? Do you want to see them? Okay.
Here we go.
Let's get into the how.
So, anyone here heard of the Agile Manifesto before?
No.
Yes. No? No?
You should read.
Go home. Go home. So do you know that the Agile Manifesto actually tells us what our highest priority should be? Does anyone know that? So there are these things called the principles, which are the second page of the Agile Manifesto. A lot of folks look at the values, but the number one principle says our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. That makes sense. Through early and continuous delivery, now I made that bold, of valuable software. So actually this is where the term continuous delivery came from, straight from the Agile Manifesto. And in my mind, when I think about teams who are on that Agile journey and who are starting to adopt Agile, when I start to think about it, this continuous delivery is the end goal. This should be what we are focused on, where we're trying to get to. So, is continuous delivery DevOps? Well, the title of this talk came about because I talk to people all the time and they say, what do you do? And I said, well, I work with teams, we do continuous delivery. And they say, oh, you're a DevOps guy. And it's like, well, I can do DevOps. Well, that's what it is, isn't it? In actuality, when you think about the entirety of continuously delivering software, DevOps is a very important piece, but it's a small piece of the overall delivery. And so it gets a lot of attention, as it should, but we're going to really focus in on talk about the other parts.
So these are the pieces that we believe are create that continuous delivery, right? So we're talking about product management. And product management is something that it is not well defined, it is not well trained. We don't have product owners or product managers that get in the role and are really trained and educated well on product management. They come from old schools of business, from old ways of thinking, from creating those 30 pages of requirements and dropping them off to someone. But this is where we're talking about, we need now a different way to look into work. We need a different way to manage these products and to look into value and working closer with teams. So that is what that means.
So we believe that there are several key areas to continuous delivery. Product management is really key, and it's the one that most people get wrong, unfortunately. We believe that the development organization has to change significantly. The way we write code, the way we test code, the way we ensure quality radically changes. DevOps is a very key component to this as well. We're going to talk briefly about that. And then there's one other piece that people tend to be afraid of, and it's the organization. We believe that in order to successfully do this, there often are a lot of changes that we need to make to the organization, both in the organizational structure and also in the way that the organization views things like risk and value. So we'll get into each of those. But I'm going to...
Or things like culture.
That's right.
So projects. Projects is how most of the organizations run right now. Who is over and over, start a project, finish a project, start a project, finish a project? Most of you. So this is something that most of the organizations are very projectized. That's how we see the work coming to us. We have a small, narrow need, and we start a project, and then after that is done, we start something else. So, but the problem with the projects is that they are confined. Projects are limited view system. So when we start a project, we're not saying how is this project going to affect other systems around? How is this going to affect an end-to-end of our system? We only look at one small portion and we think, this is what we're going to do, we're making an improvement, we're changing something here, and that's it. At the end of the project, the team disappears. Best case is that the team stay together, but usually it disappears, and that work that was changed is thrown out to someone like maintenance or operations or someone else that needs to deal and support now this change that came. Is this how your teams works, right? There's a project, we all work, and then someone else takes care of it. The way it works is we onboard quickly, so someone has made a decision, this is what we're going to do. We get the money, we go and we find some money somewhere, because it looks like organizations have money, but we need to go and ask for those. And then we start bringing people. Some people are full-time, they come full. Some come with only one arm and a leg, 50%. And some come like even with less, like 30%. I don't know how that is, maybe just one side of the head or something. We start splitting people, right? Because they might be in other projects, but we need them here. So we start creating these teams sometimes that are just people that come because someone told them that you need to work in this project. And in between of creating and getting the work done, we also need to create now the new teams. And who has had an experience that as soon as 5 people got together, the team was awesome, amazing, everybody loved each other? It takes some time to build a team, right? So you start with an unknown, a project that you need to change, and another unknown, a group of people that need now to work as a team. You start with 2 big unknowns in this project. Huge risks. Lot of problems just from the beginning. But we do the onboarding quickly. Hey, here's the project, here are the requirements. You're going to need to send a request for to have access to the environments that you need, then it takes like 2 weeks for everybody to set those environments up. And then 2 weeks, maybe it's early, sorry. And then you're going to start. And then what we do is, so we gather people, we do some work, eventually we start doing the work, and then we end. Most of the time it's late, but we end, and then everybody goes away. This is not how we want to do work. This is not continuous delivery, because projects don't really continuously deliver. They just deliver something, and we don't know even if what we deliver is valuable, because we go away from it. So it is not the right way. And what we want to do is move from projects to products. Wow. Do we have products companies here? We have. Amazing.
Yes.
Good. So we need to start looking into focusing into products, because products give us now an end-to-end picture from the customer needs to what we deliver. Did we fulfill the customer needs, and is the complete circle that we're looking for, and it's not just pieces of it. We're looking from the customer has a need, we deliver something, we try something, we get the feedback, we see if the customer is happy with what we did, and now we continue on something else, or we fix and we continue until we get a good feedback and the customers are happy. So, remember the world? The world is better for a product manager when we work in a product way, when we think product rather than project. Because now, the product manager has the power to hear everything from the world, from all of those groups of people that we said are in the world, and bring those into something concrete for the team, but with a focus and with a purpose that is continuously going to add value into the product that we have. And that world now is closer to the team, and the team is also more aware of what's out there. Things that we do are experiments and data, because with those two, we drive product. We don't always know, product managers don't always know that if we do this thing, it's always going to give us the right results and everybody's going to be happy. But we need data for that. And to collect data, we need to do small tests, small experiments to learn out of it. And these are the ones where now a product manager is lucky to have a team that continuously delivers something quick. If you are working with a team that takes months to push something in production, those tests and experiments are painful. But when I have a team that continuously delivers something small, and I can run small experiments, and I get data from it, as a product manager, I'm very, very happy, because now I can make a better decision on what is my next experiment and what is the next thing I'm going to try, in order to understand that the customer is in the right path and is getting happy and is bringing more subscriptions or sale or whatever it is. I measure it. So this is where now the product management needs the support of these agile teams with a strong development and continuous delivery. So how can I get started to move into this direction? If possible, eliminate projects and move to product-based thinking. It is not an easy thing to do. It is easier said than done. And in some big organization, it is very hard to move there, because this is how we have run. I have worked in organizations that have been going for hundreds of years, banks, right? They have been for hundreds of years going like this. So to change the structure, moving from projects to product, there are so many structures and so many groups in these organizations that support this way of working the project. So it is not an easy thing to do. However, if we start talking about products, if we start saying, hey, what is the product? Can we understand what the product is? That is going to be probably the first step to start getting these organizations to organize in a different way. Make your releases smaller. Much, much, much smaller. these big releases with millions of dollars and long times are not helping us to learn quickly. Those experiments, remember the experiments that I said about? We need these releases to be smaller. And for releases to be smaller, we need to think something small, a small change, MVPs, right? Minimum viable products, or to think something, I'm coming up later with the learning release, and I'm going to talk more about those. Use hypothesis and experiments. Hypothesis is the part of the product management that is going to help us move forward stronger and reducing risk, reducing the unknowns, reducing, well, I think, or I guess. Every time you hear I think or I guess, you are not sure what's going on. So remove those and move ahead with a better, stronger information in hand and data in hand. Collect data and learn, right? You're never going to know as a product manager, you're never going to know everything. Bring the data. Data is going to help you. Bring the data to the team, and together you're going to collaborate to find the next best thing. Differentiate between learning and earning releases. I mentioned earlier, a lot of companies start using now the buzzwords like MVP and stuff like that, and very often they don't even know what it means, or they come with a wrong understanding of it. I have asked 5 people, what does MVP mean? And I had 7 different responses. So I have started removing that sense because we were fighting more between my definition is right versus your definition. And I've moved into, let's agree to do some learning releases when we know we are not going to make money out of it, but we're going to learn something. And then earning releases. This is now that we have learned, now that we have data, we're going to deliver something that is going to bring actually subscription sales and is going to make us money. So with that change, we're going to change the conversation when we plan, when we promise to sponsors. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to have some learning releases because there are some things we want to learn first.
Okay, so we talked about product management. I'm going to get into the development side of things here real quickly. And the first thing I want to talk about is in continuous delivery. If we're going to be pushing code to production many times a day, clearly we have to make sure that we have high quality. We can't push software with a lot of defects, buggy software out, or we'll kind of make our customers angry a little bit. So there's this idea that comes from Lean that says we should build with quality in, and that's kind of fundamental for what we're doing. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the core practices that we use in order to ensure that. The first is, I'm going to start kind of low level and work my way up. So one of the fundamental things that we do is we eliminate source code branches. Yes, we don't even use git flow. I know that are there developers here? Yeah? Okay, wow. Excellent. Very good. I'm happy you're here. I could just talk so many times and it's like Scrum Masters only, and they don't learn a lot of what I'm talking about. So yeah, we believe that branches are way too high risk. Developers, has anybody here ever seen a merge problem before? Or I should ask, has anybody not seen one? That would be absolutely. So by everybody working with the same code base, working on master, what happens is we are able to integrate each other's changes very, very rapidly. Now, that brings into question, how do we keep incomplete code from winding up in front of our end users? And there are a lot of techniques. The one that I'm mentioning here is something called feature toggles. So for those who aren't familiar with that idea, think about being able to have a piece of code and say, we can decide when to turn it on and off. And when it's off, it can't be seen by our end users. When it's on, it can be. And in fact, feature toggles are not just simply an on or off switch. If they're done right, it's actually something that we give to the product folks. And they can decide, you know, I want to turn this on for 5% of my users just so I can start to collect a little bit of data for that experiment that we're running and just see for the first 3 days, and then say, okay, let's go up to 50%. So in other words, it's a controlled way to release the software. Just one of the techniques. I'll mention a few others later.
Is the experiments that I was talking about earlier.
So, and this is how we guard incomplete code from our end users. Test first development, pairing, and mobbing. So there is a huge emphasis on test automation, but primarily in the unit test space. In fact, I've got some slides specifically about that. We are constantly building tests at the same time that we're building the code to test the things that we're building. So the pairing and mobbing is another thing. So if you haven't done this before, the idea there is that we don't necessarily work in isolation. What we do is we will work with somebody else, or in some cases as a mob. And a mob is where an entire team sits with one computer and works on one thing end to end until it's finished.
Including product owner.
That's right. That's right. Well, we have to have a product owner there, or how will we know the details? Because we don't rely on documentation for that. In order for this to work well, there are some other things that we need. I think I'm going to touch base on these when I get into the build pipeline idea, but test data management and service virtualization. So the other thing that happens in this space is that there is no such thing anymore as the tester on the team owning quality. So if, in fact, in some cases there are no testers on the team. But if there are testers, they have to give up that control, because everybody on the team shares the focus of making sure that we deliver quality. Everybody on the team shares the responsibility for testing. Again, I've got a lot more to talk about related to that. And then the last thing at this level is there is no such thing as a testing phase. So how many of you build something for a period of time and then you go into a testing phase, or I've heard some people call it a hardening phase? Yeah? So in the continuous delivery world, that code's already in production. It's too late. There is no such thing as we build something for a period of time and then we stop and we say, now let's verify that the quality is there, because that code is already being used by our end users. So instead, we have to step back and say, what do we need to do while we're constructing the software to ensure that the quality is as high as possible? So again, I'm going to go into this, a lot of details. Everybody has seen some diagram like this of some sort, right? So the fact is there are a lot of things that we need to do to test our software. And these are actually just some of them. I'll go into more detail in just a moment. So the mistake that a lot of people make is that they assume that there's only one way to test the software. So I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a company and they've taught their testers how to use some tool for test automation, and next thing you know they have 47,000 through the UI end-to-end type of tests. Wrong. Not the way that we go. So in continuous delivery, what we do is we tend to push 95% of all of the automation down into the unit test level. That is where we test our software. Why? Well, first of all, those tests run a lot faster, and getting very fast feedback is quite important to me, number one. Number two, I can test more thoroughly at that level. So something small that there might be a lot of permutations to write end-to-end tests, it is a huge overhead and a huge cost, and as a result, we tend to not get down to that level of granularity. But in unit tests, I can write 20, 30, 40, 50 unit tests in a very short period of time. So the testing tends to be a lot more thorough at that level. Last but not least, it's much easier to evolve those tests with the application as the application is evolving, especially if we're using those tests to drive the test, or drive the development as well. At the very top, we have user tests. You see, I'm kind of dividing those into two categories. These are more of your testing as an end user would. I've got automated and I've got exploratory testing here. The arrow is so critical. Every time we think of something, we need to ask ourselves, how far down that triangle or that pyramid can I push those tests? And I want to give you a couple of examples. These are real life examples. So I was doing some work with a company that they had this page that showed some financial data, and it was kind of in a table format, and it would show somebody's stock holdings and such. And there was a requirement that if any of those dollar values was a negative value, it was formatted differently. It had some parentheses around it and some other things like that. And also, the font was supposed to be a red color. So they had both the formatting and the font, just so that people could, who were visually, couldn't tell the color difference, could see the formatting. And the tester had written 2 tests for that. The tester had written a test that logged into the system, navigated out to that page with an account that they knew the value was negative, and checked to make sure that the formatting was as it should be for negative value, and it checked to make sure that it was red. And then they had a second test that logged into one where they knew it was a positive value to make sure that the formatting wasn't there, etc. So we deleted both of those tests. And we ended up writing, a dozen or so unit tests around that. Why? Because it was JavaScript that was doing the formatting. That's where the test belonged. And it was JavaScript that applied the style that turned it red. Again, that's where the test belongs. So whenever we're thinking about all of these requirements, I have folks all the time to say, well, we have to test this through the UI because it's a UI thing. Actually, I'll call BS on that, because I can just tell you that if you're going to do continuous delivery, you want this very fast, rapid feedback loops, you're going to need to push the vast majority of those tests down into the unit testing level. So,
and as a product owner, that for me is very important, because when those tests at the user level start breaking and they become very fragile because we made a new change, we start ignoring those, and I lose track of what I'm tracking, what I'm valuing, what I'm testing automatically. So I lose track of, are my base core functionality still working well?
So just for those who aren't technical, I've got a couple of slides here that just real quickly talk about those different tests that I was mentioning. So a unit test literally tests one small piece of one object, if you will, or function, depending on which language, etc., that you're using. So a unit test might only just test a little piece of that, or maybe just a little piece of that. And when I say that we're testing our system by these unit tests, some folks get very nervous about that, but I like to think of it, so G. Paw Hill has this analogy that he uses quite a lot. If you haven't heard of G. Paw, you should look him up. His blogs are great, his videos are hilarious. So, but he talks about the way that you test a chain is by testing each link of the chain. And you can think about these unit tests that way. So, when we talk about that middle layer, which I kind of skipped over really quickly, this is another style of test that I help developers, or I work with developers to build integration tests. And it's just because sometimes I do want to make sure a little bit larger scope that maybe is finishing a little bit higher level business thing works together. So it might be something akin to this. Again, these integration tests would never ever cross an architectural boundary or anything like that. And last but not least, at that very end, we do write a few tests that tend to go end to end through the system itself. We only write tests at that level for things that we can't figure out any possible way of testing them in the lower level. And to be quite honest, that's not very much. So there are other things that we have to think about when any sizable application. We have to think about things like accessibility, like security, like performance, etc. So fitness functions, these other types of things. And again, these are owned by everybody on the team. So you might think about it like this. Let's say Ardita's a tester and I'm a developer on the team, and we're working on something, and I have just pushed my last commit, and I think, all the acceptance tests are right. And I might ask Ardita, so what's left? And she might say, Cheezy, we made some changes to the UI, and our definition of done is accessibility. Can you fire up JAWS and read back the screen reader or whatever? So in other words, everybody on the team owns all of those different aspects of quality. There is no such thing, developers, of building something and then waiting for the testers to finish out the testing. You're doing it.
Actually, testers are big, they bring a lot into, from the beginning, to product managers and to developers into, hey, we're going to do this, but let's think also about these cases, because testers are the ones that think that, testers are the ones that challenge us with different ways of using our products.
So how many would agree with this statement? Oh, wait a minute, there. I'm sorry, I forgot to click it. So there's this idea in continuous integration that anytime the build breaks, it becomes the highest priority. So if the build itself breaks and we're in the middle of working on something, we will stop right away and jump over it and fix the build, right? You guys have heard of these ideas before, right? Yeah, okay. So I actually take this a step further, and that the teams that I'm working with, we implement this zero defect policy. Now, that doesn't mean that a defect never occurs, but what it does mean is that we don't have a defect tracking tool. We don't keep one because what we do is we treat a defect the same way that we would a build break. If we discover one, right away, we fix it. We don't wait, we don't delay it. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. Sorry.
How people are scared to hear we don't have a defect tracking tool. Yeah, it's scary. What are we going to do with all those bugs that we have?
Actually, we don't have many. So, coupled with a lot of these other practices, you know, the teams that I'm talking about, sometimes they'll go weeks or even a few months between discovered defects, escape defects for the team. So there aren't that many, but what we do is we fix them right away. So it takes a while to get to this level, without a doubt. And I'm not suggesting that you go out and uninstall your defect tracking tool tomorrow, but I am suggesting that you start to think about these technical practices that I'm talking about that drive quality higher, that allow us to deliver much more rapidly, and get to a point where a defect is a very rare occurrence. And then at that point, go back to the 700 defects that are in your backlog and just delete them all. So on the technical side, how can I get started? And I know I'm going to have to pick it up a bit because we're...
Yes.
So people ask me all the time, yeah, I like this idea, how do I get started? So the first thing, developers, you need to test your code, okay? That's the first thing. You know, I like to think about it like this, that you know, a developer who doesn't care enough about what they're building to make sure that it works, that's not somebody that I really want to work with. Think about it that way. Developers and testers, set together, work closely together, talk to each other for God's sake. I know that you find each other scary, but quality improves whenever you work together more closely. And you'll learn a lot from each other as well. Try mob programming. It works. It's really powerful. And instead of my experience is that it really does not slow down the delivery of a team. Maybe initially while we're getting used to working in this fashion, it'll slow down. But if you stay with it, I have a lot of teams that when I first start working with them, we tried this just because we're learning new things, and that's a great way to learn new things. But over time, the team finds the interaction and the collaboration so exhilarating and that they become passionate about working in this way. And yes, try to find a way to eliminate those branches. So DevOps absolutely is a piece or a part of continuous delivery. I like to think of DevOps as trying to drive all of the risk out of the system. And believe me, there's a lot of risk that we have in the system. And let me talk about what I mean by that. But first of all, I want to start by making a statement here. I go to companies all the time and they say, so tell me, well, we've created a DevOps department. What? You've created a DevOps?
Look how many people are taking pictures of that.
How many of you have a DevOps department?
Yeah.
So I have some news for you. DevOps is not a department. So DevOps is about empowering your developers. It's about giving your developers the tools that they need to deliver very, very rapidly. So if you have a centralized group that's doing that, their job is to build something that they can hand free control over to your developers. That's what DevOps is. It might sound frightening, but that is the core of it. If you don't believe, go read some of Jez Humble and Dean Kemp's books. These are the guys who come up with these ideas. So, automate everything, absolutely. This means our deployment pipelines, which I'm going to go into details about what that might look like here in just a moment. But at a minimum, it should run all of our tests and all of the audit-related items that we have. We never make manual changes to any environment. Who here thinks that their different environments at their company are like a box of chocolates? You're never sure what you're going to get, right? Because everything is different. So again, DevOps is designed to drive consistency and drive risk out of that. And the tools for containerizing our environments, building our environments from scripts are there so that we can guarantee consistency. And DevOps is about designing something to maximize developer productivity. I think that's my key point there. Ultimately, the pipeline, the creation of the environments, all of these things need to be owned by the developers. So the developer should be able to write a script, make a change, add anything or remove anything from their pipeline that the team believes is necessary. And the developer should be able to dynamically, on the fly, bring about changes to all of their environments. They're accountable for delivering the software. They're accountable for quality. They need to own this. So I wanted to give you a little example of what a pipeline could be, because this is really critical. So this is kind of modeled after one of my clients that we put in place. And so the pipeline is designed at this idea of stages, and each stage is kind of responsible for something a little bit different. And I'll walk you through that. So in this specific case, stage 1 would run the unit tests real quickly. It would do some static code analysis, sort of a sonar type thing, if you know what that is. And at this client, we decided for stage 1, we wanted to run a little smoke test. So basically, we'd quickly fire up a container with the app. We would just try to hit the app. There's really no testing. I just wanted to make sure that somebody didn't make a configuration change or something like that, and the app wouldn't run. So stage 1 needs to be very, very fast. 5 minutes or so is probably about the max that you want for this. If you are containerized, this is where your container, that production container gets built. And that container travels down the pipeline as well. So if stage 1 passes, stage 2 might run all of those automated tests at the top that we talked about. And if it were a browser app, in this case it was, we would run them just on one browser. We would parallelize them. Why? Well, at this specific client, we ultimately ended up with several hundred of these tests. And we wanted them to run in about 5 to 10 minutes or so. And so we would run them 50 or 100 at a time so that we can get that very fast feedback. And so the point here is that by the end of stage 2, oh, I have one other thing to say about that, but by the end of stage 2, we've got an entire regression of our app, and it should be 20 minutes. So within 20 minutes of checking code in, I should have a full regression of my app. Now, I want to mention something about stage 2 as well, because there really should be a 2A and a 2B here, because what we would do is, initially when we would deploy, we would have all those feature toggles open. So all the work in progress is open. And we would have some tests that were tagged that they were just on the work that's in progress, and those would run first. And typically there would only be 5 or 8 of those. They're not that many, because, like I said, we released very quickly. And then we would shut the toggles off, and all of the rest of the tests would run. And that was primarily to make sure that something didn't accidentally leak through a toggle, because it happens. We make mistakes. So if stage 2 passes, what we might do then is we would take that code, and we would take a subset of those through the UI tests, maybe 5% or so, and we would run them across a series of different browsers or mobile devices. So this would be more of the cross-browser testing. Again, we didn't have to do it with very many tests. We weren't testing behavior. The behavior we'd already tested. This was just to make sure that when I run this on an iPad, it doesn't completely work out or something like that. So just a small number. Next, we would run the static and dynamic security tests. Performance tests, I think we ultimately ended up adding more compliance-related items in here as well, and eventually deploy to production. So again, the idea here is that the pipeline needs to be solid enough that the team owns it, right? That the team feels comfortable that by the time it gets to the end of this process, that the quality is high enough that it can go to production. That's key. That's why we let the team own it. The last thing that I want to talk about is those feature toggles are what allow us to separate out deployment from release. Think about it this way. Deployment is something that the developers own. Deploy, 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 deploy throughout the day, every commit. So we might have 20, 30, 80 deployments. But it's the product folks who make the decision that we're ready to release now. So they make the decision, they're continuously watching it, and they make the decision, okay, this is now ready to turn on. We've been working on something for 3 days now. We think that this experiment is ready to turn on for our users, and they make the decisions. And in fact, it's much better if we give them a dashboard so that they completely control the feature toggles, 100%.
Yeah, that is key, right? Because very often we think, well, it's good, we push the code in production. However, in some cases when users are employees, I don't know if you work in a bank or on telco, there are internal people, maybe they need to be aware that something is changing and they need a sense of, okay, now the button is not here, it's there. And that communication needs some time to happen, depending where you are. So give some time to your product managers to prepare the end users, whoever they are, for that change. If it is small, maybe it doesn't need a lot of training, because just like Amazon changes their interfaces like 30 times from the moment you start to buy something to till you end buying something, and you don't read the manual on every step because it is intuitive. Maybe in those cases it's easy, but in some cases you might need to stop and think, how am I affecting the end users? Do they need any help, any training? So give them the time.
Okay, so DevOps, how do we get started? For goodness sakes, if your build isn't automated, start there. Okay, you'll be amazed at how much value that will add. Automate your deployment. If you don't have something like continuous integration set up, I strongly suggest getting it in place. It's very easy to do. I'm baffled by when I have conversations with companies. Yeah, we've got a 6-month project to set up our CI server to roll it out. There was one time where I was working on a product idea with somebody, and I hopped on a plane in Toronto, and by the time I landed in Austin, on the plane, I had our CI pipeline to production built. So it doesn't take, it's not rocket science to get this in place. And don't worry if you don't have all of those stages that I mentioned. If you have your build automated and you have your deployment automated, that's a good place to start. Just run the build and deploy it somewhere. And then you can evolve it over time. And I'm sure you all have lots of unit tests, so run unit tests as well. Right, guys? Great developers? You've all got it? Yes? Okay. All right. So we are running out of time, so should we go through this really quickly?
I'll go through this quickly because it takes a lot of time. So we need to rethink organization. Everything we're saying here, it doesn't just work because now you have agile development or agile product management or agile HR, agile finance, agile. We need to think how all of this organization works in an agile way and brings agility into what we do. It's not about being agile, it's about having agility in what we do, how we communicate with customers, and how we bring the value. So we need to rethink all the things. Dependencies. If we're waiting for a lot of, for another area of an organization to give us the okay to continue, that's a dependency. We need to reduce those. How do we reduce those? Cross-functional teams. Testers and developers are together because we're reducing that cross-functional delay that we have. Well, if you think that there are other areas, well, bring them in, right? Bring the ops in, DevOps. Bring product managers in, agile teams. Bring everybody that creates a delay, bring them in closer and reduce those dependencies.
Do you guys experience that where you can't get something out because the dependency you have isn't ready, and they told you, we'll have that ready in 3 months? Yeah?
Yeah. Databases, woo, big things.
So one of the fundamental things that I think that a lot of people don't really understand is that whenever we're talking about continuous delivery, we really need to rethink how our organization is structured. So we're out of time. Artie and I would love, I know there's other questions, catch us in the hallway. We'd love to talk to you. And thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.